or let me know anything you want to let me know. All right. Hello? Okay, we're ready. Hello, and welcome to today's video, where we're going to be talking about why we resist self-love and cling to the idea. Cling to self-hate, okay? Because this is something that I feel like, again, is really, really common in our own psychology and is going to come up for pretty much everybody who's on a path of trying to love themselves and trying to have more compassion for themselves. And at the same time, this is something we're going to face as we tell other people that we are on a self-love journey, or that we are on a self-love path, or that we're trying to have compassion for ourselves. It's very common that we're going to run into people who are going to tell us that self-love is dangerous and self-love is bad, and trying to love yourself is going to just, you know, cause you to descend into all of your worst stuff. And if every human loved themselves, if we didn't realize that we were evil, that it would be like the worst thing ever for humanity, and this is how we're gonna lose all sense of justice and rightness and order in the world. And when I was first starting my kind of teaching path on this whole self-love thing, it was very common, actually, for me to hear feedback that people were telling them that self-love was dangerous and that they needed to be really careful with it, and to be really careful of people like me who were telling them that there was something good about them and that they weren't bad fundamentally and that they weren't fundamentally flawed, and that this was like a dangerous teaching that, again, people needed to be careful of. And I remember in the beginning just thinking, like, what? Like, how could self-love be dangerous? How could liking yourself be something that is, like, inherently bad or wrong, or, you know, gonna cause destruction in some way? Or how could self-love hurt somebody was always just my question. And over the years since I've been doing this, for the last 10 years or something like this, I have come to a much deeper understanding of why people are afraid of self-love, and why people think that it's dangerous, and why people really believe that if we love ourselves, we're going to descend into chaos, and that we're going to lose our ability to be good people, and that that it's also like just kind of allowing humans to be their worst selves, and that would then equal, you know, a descent into chaos. But so, like I say, now that I understand this at a much deeper level, I feel like I can speak to it on a much deeper level. And so that's what we're going to do today. So again, just in case you don't know, I have a mystery school, a membership community, whatever you want to call it, where you get access to over 300 video and written lessons, all about how to get on this self-love path, how to get off the path of being in a constant state of self-improvement and feeling like there's something wrong with you and feeling like you're bad and you're wrong and you're broken, to figuring out that you're actually perfectly innocent and lovely and beautiful just as you are, and that your pain and all the things that you're going through in your life are something that you can deal with, that they are something that you can do something about as you learn more about yourself and where your pain is coming from and how to problem solve. So that is what the course is all about, and there's a membership Facebook group so everybody can talk to one another, and we have meetings every month, and it's just a really nice supportive place where you're never pressured to do anything that you don't want to do or that doesn't feel good to you. And it's all about learning how to get on your own side so you can figure out what you need in this life. So if that's something that interests you, you can find the link in my Instagram link tree, in my YouTube down in the box below, in my bio. Send me a DM if you don't know where to find it. I will help you out. And it's $15 a month. You can cancel anytime. I will give anybody and anyone a refund if they don't like it. Just letting you know about that. Okay. So again, as I was starting my self-love teaching journey, I I remember getting a lot of feedback, like I said, about people saying, you know, we need to be careful with this kind of teaching. That these self-love tools and self-love in general can be dangerous, and it can really lead to a lot of bad things, and we need to be careful with it. And like I said, I at first was just like completely perplexed by this idea. I was just like, I do not understand how having compassion for yourself could equal something dangerous. But now, again, 10 years later, I understand why people are afraid that if they love themselves, the worst thing ever is going to happen. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. It's like all the reasons why we are conditioned to fear liking and loving ourselves. Okay? Because that is what we have to understand is really going on for most of us. We have been conditioned both by the outside world and by our personal experience to hate ourselves. And we have been conditioned to believe that if we were to love ourselves, if we were to believe that we are fundamentally good, if we were to believe that we are fundamentally innocent, that we would then devolve into delusion, and that we would completely destroy our lives and become those lazy, horrible, abusive, out of control people who don't care about anyone else, who don't care about anything, and are just there to, you know, be hedonistic, feel good in the moment, and that's it. And the reality is that, first things first, people tend to believe that when people are being abusive and when people are being harmful to themselves or others, when people are acting in a way that looks very selfish, that is what self-love is, okay? And I think that's the first and most common misconception about what self-love, like what this true path of self-love actually is. That when we are loving ourselves, we are just being selfish, and we are just doing whatever feels good in the moment, no matter how it affects us long term, and no matter how it affects everyone around us. And from my vantage point, and from what I teach, that is not what self-love is, right? Just being completely selfish and only caring about yourself and only caring about the pleasure of this moment and nothing else is not the self-love path. Okay? So that's the very first thing that I want to say, is that when people believe that self-love is going to make you selfish and it's going to make you hedonistic and it's going to mean that you are literally just living for whatever pleasure you can get in the moment and who cares about the consequences, that is not self-love. Okay? That is actually a form of self-abuse that has been normalized in our culture in a lot of ways. And it is a form of self-ignorance that has been normalized in our culture. But that is not what self-love is. The true path of self-love, first and foremost, is a path of self-discovery. The true path of self-love is a path of self-discovery. It's about discovering what we need in order to function at whatever highest level we are capable of functioning at. And it's about us having joy and freedom in our lives to the degree that we can create that. And it's about having the capacity to understand where discipline, where being moderate in what we're doing, where maybe delayed momentary pleasure can equal long-term pleasure, and all of these things are necessary. It's about understanding our trauma and our history and our conditioning so that we can unravel what is coming from society and what is coming from our caregivers and what is coming from our history that is leading us to do things like our coping mechanisms, our scapegoats, our numbing, our self-sabotage, that this is how we are dealing with the pain of what normal was for us, of whatever it is that we grew up in that wasn't supportive for who and what we actually are and what we needed, that was maybe antagonistic, that was harmful. And this is how we're coping with the danger we experienced and the hurt and the harm and the lack that we experienced, and with the hurt and the harm and the lack that we may be experiencing now. Okay? A huge part of the self-love path is understanding that how society is set up, how our families were set up, what normal is, may not actually be healthy and supportive of us and our growth and our expansion and our expression. And understanding that in order to find a way of life where we don't have to cope, numb, self-sabotage, and scapegoat as much as we are doing now, we need to first discover who we are and what we need and what hurts, and then why it hurts, and why we cope the way we do, and why we self-sabotage the way we do, and what we're trying to protect ourselves from, and what we're trying to avoid. And it's this whole unpacking of society and our family culture and what has been normalized, so that we can again discover what parts of normal don't actually work to help keep us healthy and happy and balanced in this life, and what parts of normal do, and then what parts of that normal we can change, and what parts of that normal we can't change and need to develop tools, different tools for dealing with, that are possibly less self-sabotaging or numbing or scapegoating, and we can learn to cope in healthier ways. Like, this path of self-love, again, is all about discovering why you are in pain, why you have the habits you have that may be ineffective in creating harmony and balance in your life, that may be harmful to yourself or others. And realizing that, again, it's not because you're bad, it's not because you're evil, it's not because there's something bad, wrong, or broken about you. It's always because you are doing the best you can to operate within a normal that you were handed that may not feel good for you. That is the foundation of what self-love is. It's figuring out why we are in pain, figuring out what hurts, figuring out what we need, figuring out what we don't need, and then figuring out how to get our needs met better so that we can create a life that is more harmonious, that is less drama, less coping, less numbing, less self-sabotaging. Not because we are getting rid of those bad behaviors, but because we are supporting ourselves in a new way so that we don't need those behaviors. Okay? It's about understanding that all the things we think are wrong with us, right? Our self-sabotage, our coping, our numbing, our addictions, our scapegoats, our lack of communication skills, our whatever our habits are, that we look at ourselves and we say, if I just fixed this about myself, if I just got rid of this about myself, if I just stopped doing this, if I just could start doing this, my life would be amazing. We start to understand that, like, no, if we just got rid of our coping mechanism, if we just got rid of our self-sabotage, if we just got rid of how we're numbing or stimulating ourselves or whatever, that under that would be the pain that's driving us to do that thing in the first place. Under that would be the real reason we don't feel good. And so it's not about getting rid of these bad habits. It's about understanding what needs these habits are meeting so that we can heal ourselves, we can get therapy, we can get support, we can go through my program, we can get one-on-one coaching, and we can better support ourselves in what we need now in our adulthoods in ways that we couldn't as children. And we can reface the trauma of our childhoods where we didn't have autonomy and where we didn't have control. And we can work through that stuff so that that pain isn't there anymore. And then again, sometimes there are things in our reality that we cannot change and that we cannot control and we cannot make better. And coming into the awareness of that we are coping and numbing and self-sabotaging and scapegoating because of things that are painful in our reality that maybe we can't change, we still then can have better capacity to emotionally process that instead of numbing it and scapegoating it and self-sabotaging. And then we can do what we can to soothe ourselves within it in a healthier way. Okay? So again, the self-love path is not about just being selfish and hedonistic. It's the exact opposite of that. It's figuring out how to actually support ourselves in living a healthy life, despite everything that was normalized in our family and in our culture that is not healthy. Because that's really, again, what we need to start to understand, is that people are behaving badly because they are in pain and they are trying to get their needs met in the only ways they know how. That is actually what's happening. Every single time, no matter what. Everyone is just trying to feel good in the only ways they know how, within the systems that they exist in, with the awareness that they have, with the tools and the access that they have, with the resources that they have. That is why we are how we are. Okay, so again, why do we resist self-love? Because we fundamentally don't understand how humans work. We truly still, as a society, believe that humans can be evil. That humans can come from a place of just being evil and bad and wrong and terrible and have nefarious intentions for absolutely no reason other than that they are evil, and that people need to be punished, and we need to be controlled, and we need to be corralled, and we need to be constantly on top of how horrible we are in order to be good and not just become horrible. Okay. Now, again, I am not here to tell anyone what to or what not to believe, but I want to make it clear that when we grow up a lot of the time in a religious setting, there is a tendency, and this is not always, this might not be for you, but it's something to consider. There tends to be a narrative that humans are fundamentally flawed and broken, that we are in need of fixing or saving. And even in something like Buddhism, where it's still like humans are ignorant, humans have a lack of understanding of themselves or truth or whatever it is. And this is why we are evil. This is why we are bad. That if we were to just trust ourselves or you know, listen to ourselves or be in any way not listening to a guru or a leader or following some other path or in need of a savior in some way, that again, we are just going to descend into our worst stuff because that's who and what we are. Or because that's just our illusory nature that we have clung to for some random reason. Like we are literally indoctrinated from the very beginning that we are bad and wrong and broken and in need of fixing or saving or delivering or awakening. And that is why we suffer. That is the root of our suffering. Our evil, sinful, delusional nature. That, I hope we can see, is an incredibly painful idea. That it is our fundamental nature that makes it so that we are in pain. That it is our fundamental delusion that is making it so that we suffer in this life. And that the answer to that suffering is being saved by someone or something, or being awakened by someone or something. And this usually requires that we go on some religious journey of following all these rules and doing all these disciplines and studying these words and trying to fix ourselves, or sacrificing ourselves for some cause or some whatever in order to earn our goodness. Right? We are conditioned from the very beginning of our lives that if you are in pain, it is because you are evil, wrong, and bad and delusional. And that the solution is some sort of self-sacrifice, some sort of understanding how wrong, bad, and broken you are and how evil you are, and the study of your delusion so that you can be liberated from it either in this life or in the next life. Right? Like, that's just normal. That's normal doctrine that most of us would think, yeah, that's what reality is. But again, if we can understand where humanity probably got that idea, that I am suffering because there's something wrong, bad, and broken about me, we can trace that back. Not to some divine revelation, necessarily. I mean, this is my opinion. You can disagree with me if you like. To our childhood experience, right? As children, it would have appeared to us as though our caregivers had access to everything. They had all wisdom, all knowledge, all capacity to save us from our pain and to give us pleasure. Because our minds and our bodies and our experience of life was just that. We knew caregivers were there. When we made a sound, they did something. They cared for us. They did everything. We didn't have any awareness of how to get our needs met, how to get out of pain, how to have pleasure, any of these things. All we knew was the physical sensation of pain and pleasure. And it was being reflected to us that caregivers were the ones that created this pain or pleasure. They were the ones that were in control of it. And it would have appeared to us as we grew that the one thing we had control over was our behavior. So it would have appeared to us as though the only thing, the only reason our caregivers would ever neglect to give us what we want and what we need was because we were doing something wrong. The only reason our caregivers would harm us or hurt us or do something that didn't feel good to us was because we were doing something wrong. And then we grew into culture, right? And that message was continually reinforced. That you are bad, you are wrong, you are broken, you're not good enough. There's something not good about you. And that is why people don't like you, people don't take care of you, whatever it is. This idea of there being an ultimate power that has ultimate power to give us everything we want and to save us from anything that hurts. And that this ultimate power is determining whether they're going to bless us with pleasure or punish us with pain, is deciding that based on the one thing we can do, which is behave. Sounds a lot like God in the sky punishing and blessing us based on our behavior. And then the rules for what good and bad behavior were in our childhoods had nothing to do, generally speaking, with how real reality works. Because we were not interacting with real reality. The rules for how to get food, the rules for how to get pleasure, the rules for how to get away from pain were completely centered around what our caregivers approved of or didn't approve of. What caused our caregivers to care for us and what didn't. And that was completely based on our caregivers and how they thought and what they believed and how they operated and what was going on in their life. Because remember, again, to us, everything that they did to us, around us, for us, not for us, had something to do with us. Even if it didn't. Right? Our caregivers could have been overwhelmed, stressed at work one day, have something going on. We wanted their attention. They yelled at us. We thought, oh my gosh, I'm horrible and bad and I need to be quiet. When it had nothing to do with us. They were in a stressed out state. There would have been many times when our caregivers simply didn't have the capacity to give us what we wanted or what we needed. And we were interpreting that as something wrong with us, something being caused by us, when really they just didn't have access, didn't have awareness, couldn't have done it even if they wanted to. We weren't perceiving any of that. We were only perceiving. Caregivers have access to everything. The rules are, do whatever it is that pleases them, avoid whatever it is that displeases them, and that is how I stay safe. That is how I get my needs met. So learning how to fit in to the culture we were in was like the first program we got. That love and approval equals getting our needs met. That being rejected and shamed and blamed equals being unsafe. Because these caregivers were our source of absolutely everything. So to lose them would have been to lose our entire capacity to survive. That was an existential crisis. So then that is where we started to develop our hatred of ourselves. Because any part of us that we perceived, so again, this may not even have been real reality, but any part of us that we perceived was the reason why caregivers were pulling away from us or not giving us pleasure or punishing us, would have then felt to us like this is a dangerous part of me. This is a part of me that's going to get me killed. This is a part of me that is making me inherently unsafe because it's separating me from the gods that are my caregivers. And I, again, need to figure out whatever rules I need to follow to be approved of. And whatever rules I need to follow to not be rejected. And this is how I stay safe. This is how I survive. Fitting into what those around me want and need from me is how I survive. And these parts of myself that take me away from that are bad, wrong, shameful parts because they separate me from my caregivers. Okay? So that is where we all learned to have self-hate. And then again, that could have been something that our caregivers were really saying, like, that's wrong, that's bad, you shouldn't be that way. It could have been verbalized. It could have been the actions that they had. They'd pull away from us when we were a certain way, or they just don't help us when we're a certain way or whatever. Or we're noticing patterns of our behavior and their behavior that didn't actually even exist, but it seemed like that to us. This is where we learned, again, to hate ourselves, to fear ourselves, that parts of us were wrong, bad, and broken. But the problem was that those parts of ourselves that we were denying and rejecting and trying to get rid of are parts of ourselves. They are inherent to who we are. And so sometimes it was like immature behavior, like hitting another child and then getting, and then you throw a little physical and emotional abuse in there. Absolutely. This is the thing, right? And then if we were actually like abused, this is even worse. This is even heavier. We blame ourselves even more for that. Because that pain, again, all we could perceive is the only reason our caregivers would be bad to us or harmful to us was because there was something wrong with us. And that message may have been communicated to us. It is because of you. I am blaming you. We may have been told that outright. Or again, we were going to internalize it anyways, because that's the one thing we had control over, and that's how it made sense to us. Yeah? And then we go out into the world, and it's even more like that. We then just expand who we have to measure up to and what we need to be approved by in order to be safe. We never make the transition. Oh yeah, no, I want to say this. So again, these parts of ourselves are parts of ourselves. We're not going to get rid of them. So like I said, if we're being yelled at for hitting another child, and we're being told, you're bad and you're wrong for doing that, we need to understand that was a growth barrier. That was a maturation point of, I want something, they have it, I'm going to be violent. That's a growth process where we then need to be helped in developing our empathy so that we can evolve beyond violence to get what we want into communication to get what we want, into cooperation to get what we want. We needed someone not to tell us that's bad, wrong, don't hit. Because then some of us just learn to not hit, but we don't know why, and we don't actually develop. We needed someone to say, okay, now can you go and look at the child that you just hit? How does it feel to look at them crying? How does it feel? And we would have said, if we were connected to ourselves as little children, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel good. I don't want to do it like that. And then if our caregiver said, okay, there's a different way we can do it. Can we ask if you can have the toy in 15 minutes? And then they can have it for 15 minutes. And then maybe you can play with it together. And then see how that feels. Like, give the child an experience of the difference between violence and how that feels. Like actually having to look at the person you're being violent towards and feeling what that feels like. Versus, what does cooperation feel like? And then that child would have learned in their bodies that cooperation feels better. And they would have evolved their consciousness. But for most of us, that never happened. So then now we're living in a world of a bunch of people who are in adult bodies who are still operating from 2-year-old violence. Because they never learned. They just got shamed, or that behavior was rewarded. Because in our culture, violence and competition is how the system keeps itself going. The fact that we are violent and competitive, and especially male people tend to be socialized into this idea that it is good to be violent and competitive. And that is what makes you strong. And that is what makes you a worthy person. You will go off to war and you will sacrifice yourself. Violence. This is how the patriarchy keeps itself going. This is how our systems of abusive consumption and production keep themselves going. So again, we are disconnected from our actual feelings and from real reality from the very beginning. And then again, sometimes what gets us rejected is our natural expression. Like maybe we're loud and obnoxious and our caregivers don't like that. And so then we spend the rest of our life hating these parts of ourselves that are inherent to us and that aren't actually wrong or bad or harmful in any real way. But we feel like they are. We feel like they're bad. We feel like they're dangerous because they got us rejected. And then our nervous systems are going to be programmed to be attracted to people who are familiar to us. So people who also don't like people who are loud and obnoxious. And then it's going to feel like everybody feels this way. Everybody hates these kinds of people. I have to hate this about myself. And then we try and shut ourselves down. We try to be less obnoxious. We try to be less loud. And we try to be less all of these things. And that is self-rejection and self-denial, which then leads to coping and numbing and self-sabotaging. Because we're constantly in a state of fighting with ourselves and not being our real selves and holding ourselves back. And that is painful. And then we have to cope and we have to numb to be with that. Sometimes what we were conditioned we had to be, like the jobs we had to work and the ways we had to do things in order to fit in and be loved and accepted, feel terrible to us. We hate it. We don't like it. It doesn't feel good. But we can't even see that. We can't even perceive that. We just think, I'm a binge eater and there's something wrong with me that I keep binging. When really it's like, no, you're in pain every single day that you go to work. And the binge is the way that you are coping with that pain every single night. It's not that if you could just stop binging, you would be happy. It's like if you stop binging, you're going to be in a lot of pain. All the pain of that work that you didn't even realize was there because that was normal and what was expected of you is going to be there. Yeah? And then trying to actually change, to not work that job anymore, to do something like this, is going to be so scary to the nervous system. That believes this is the one way I have to do and be in order to be okay. Because again, remember, we think if we get rejected, we're going to die. Because we never got the one-to-one relationship with reality, which is what we should have evolved into as adults, where we started to gain autonomy and gain capacity to think and reason and problem solve and do things, where we could say, oh, okay, it's not that I need to be approved of so that mom and dad or caregivers will empathize with my hunger and then give me food. I can get food on my own now. It's not about fitting in perfectly, and if I don't fit in, I'm going to die. It's now, what are my actual needs? What are my actual wants? What's my actual expression? How do I start to figure out what feels good for me and what doesn't, and to build a life around that, which is all about what the mystery school is. That's what the adult perspective should be. But most of us never transitioned into that. We just continue to expand the rule book of who we need to please and who we need to measure up to in order to be approved of, thinking that's how we're going to get our needs met. Because that was the first program we got. Needs get met through being approved of. In adult reality, it's gray. Because again, right, to a degree, we're cooperative beings, and being disapproved of in our society can really lead to a lot of bad things. But it's not that one-to-one anymore. So again, a lot of us, with all of our religious conditioning, with all of our cultural conditioning, with our family conditioning, and then to understand again that, right, the cultural idea of being kicked out of the group and not being accepted and not being approved of really can be dangerous for us. Being in certain groups and in certain identities can absolutely be dangerous for us based on how the systems of power wield that power. When there are systems of power that are gatekeeping resources and gatekeeping who is punished and who is rewarded and who gets opportunities and who doesn't, the need to fit in and be what everyone wants us to be is going to be a lot higher than when we have more access and more power and more privilege in this society in order to do what feels good to us without it being a threat to our survival. So we do have to understand that. A lot of the time, the control we have in terms of really being ourselves and going for what we want and what we need can be hindered by the power structures. Certain people are less safe than others to be themselves, and that is absolutely true. And that is part of why we need to do this work. Because those of us who occupy positions of privilege, like me, where I can be more and more myself, it is my job to start to dismantle the systems that are making it so that other people can't do that at the same time. That it's harder for other people. That it's actually dangerous for other people. I have to speak to these things and I have to do this because I believe it is my responsibility to pass on that privilege that I have, that I didn't earn. It was just the conditions of my birth gave me a lot of privileges. And so how can I make the world a safer place for more people? And I think education is part of that. Education on the patriarchy and why we hate ourselves, and we need to dismantle this. So that's what we're talking about today. We need to dismantle this idea that humans are fundamentally flawed and broken. Because part of what that idea does is it upholds these systems of abuse and punishment. Okay? So when we are holding on to the idea that we are evil or that human beings can be fundamentally evil, we start to say, okay, so the people who are being punished and incarcerated and exploited for their work and who don't have equal opportunity and who aren't being treated fairly in society, we are then prone to saying, what did they do to deserve it? That is a huge part of the problem with self-hate. When we believe that we are being punished and that we are being harmed by society or by the universe, and it's always because we are just wrong, bad, fundamentally doing something wrong, we are going to project that onto other people. So then when the government or whatever tells us that, yeah, we are incarcerating these people, we're punishing these people, like we're going to war and we're dropping bombs and we're doing all this stuff, but it's justified, because evil people that I'm here to protect you from. We are prone to believe it. And that is never true. That is never true. Humans do not harm other humans when they are in a state of safety. Humans, generally speaking, unless there's some damage, which again, that exists. We know that there's brain chemistry alterations, that there's mutations on some level, that this exists. But even that, those people don't deserve to be punished because they are evil. We need to understand their condition, and we need to set them up so that they have less access to being able to harm others and themselves through care. But when we are willing to believe that we are evil, we are then willing to believe that other people are evil and that they deserve incarceration, that they deserve punishment, that they deserve to work a full day and not earn a living wage because their job is low level. This is shit from the patriarchy. This is how those at the top of the system maintain making as much money for themselves as possible and keeping people out of positions of power and keeping us arguing and gatekeeping one another from instead of understanding that no, it's the system that's fucked up. It's the system that's driving people to be criminals or do whatever it is that they're doing. Because they're trying to survive in a system that's inherently unfair, that's inherently abusive, that will drive them to try to do whatever they can to try to survive and make it better for themselves. And then they're going to be punished, and that punishment is then justified as, well, they're criminals. They're bad, they're wrong, they're doing all these things, and we're not looking at, well, why? Did they grow up in neighborhoods that didn't have access to education, that were food deserts, that didn't have access to upward mobility in terms of career? Because all of these things are gatekept in our society. It's not equal opportunity. And so they're doing whatever they can to try to survive, and sometimes that means people resort to violence, and they resort to crime, and they resort to all these things, not because they are evil, but because they are trying to survive in an antagonistic situation. But we don't see that. We just go, yeah, those evil people. And then the fear of God is put in us that, like, that could happen to you. If you don't follow the rules, if you don't keep doing what everyone else is expecting you to do, if you don't be a good, upstanding person, you could fall into the shit like this person. It's how we separate ourselves from fearing that that punishment and that abuse and that exploitation isn't going to happen to us because I'm a good person. I'm one of the better ones. I'm one of the special ones. I'm following the rules. I'm not a criminal. I'm not these bad things. Those bad people are those bad people. So we have to keep punishing them. We have to keep seeing them as wrong and bad so that I can feel separate and I can feel safe that that's not going to happen to me. That's what our trained lack of compassion, because we are so afraid of ourselves, is doing to us. I won't be like them. I'm not like them. They are evil people. I am not an evil person. And that's how I protect myself from believing that any bad thing is going to happen to me. Because again, we already have the programming that bad things only happen to me because I do something wrong. So we say, no, I'm one of the good ones. I'm following the rules. Those bad people aren't following the rules, and so they deserve that stuff. Instead of, we need to look at the system. We need to look at why people are like that. So this self-hate is a way of gatekeeping. It's a way of gatekeeping privileges for the few at the expense of the many. It's a way that we are driven into overconsumption and overproduction without even seeing it. The fact that we all hate ourselves so much, we believe ourselves not to be good enough, we believe ourselves to be bad, wrong, and broken, and nothing is ever okay, means that, again, we are willing to overwork, to overstrive, to burn ourselves out, to sacrifice ourselves to these systems of overproduction, which equals more and more and more profit for those at the top and less and less for the working class, because we're trying to earn our goodness. Because all we want is pleasure. All we want is safety. All we want is to feel good. And that first program we got was the way that we get that is through being accepted, being approved of, being loved. And then our culture says, okay, well, the thing you need to do in order to be accepted, approved of, and loved is be more productive. Work harder. Sacrifice yourself more. And if you can't do that, consume more. What kind of brands are you wearing? What kind of events are you going to? What are you posting on social media? How exciting is your life? The two ways that we're allowed to be in our society is productive and consumptive. And so we continue to drive ourselves into more and more production and more consumption. And again, believing, well, if the person working the till at McDonald's is only working a full-time job and making less than a living wage, they're not productive. They're not productive enough. That's why they deserve that. When that is a completely ridiculous idea. Do we want that service? Do we value that service? Clearly we do. There's a billion McDonald's. So obviously we want someone to be working that job. Why do they not deserve to be paid? We don't value a janitor. We don't value a school teacher. They deserve to have less than a living wage. Why? Because we've decided that's okay. So the people who own McDonald's make all the money because it's societally acceptable to exploit their workers. Because we're all like, well, they're low level. Unbelievable. We don't have compassion. Because again, we're trained. You're less than me. I don't work at McDonald's. I'm a lawyer. I deserve to be making hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Like, that's how our culture is set up. I'm producing more. But are you? Right? Like, so then again, we're not questioning our cultural values. We're not questioning why certain things are valued so much more than others. Like, again, we've talked about this a lot on this channel. If every singer on the planet disappeared, okay, it'd be sad. We'd miss music for sure. But we'd carry on. If every janitor quit their job, we wouldn't carry on. It would be a disaster. And yet, singers make billions of dollars, millions of dollars, and janitors can't afford to live. What kind of value system is that? And again, we justify it. We justify it as, well, they deserve it. They're not high level. Self-hate is what is leading to that. Because again, so much of the time, it's not even that we are aware that we're complicit to this stuff. Because we're so wrapped up in our own fear. The manufactured discontent of society that constantly tells us we're not good enough, we're not okay, we're not good, we're not enough, we're not worthy, we're bad, we're wrong, we're sinful, keeps us focused in on our own navels, fighting for ourselves, fighting against one another. And this is what keeps the system going. We're blind to it all the time. We have no idea what's going on. We're so afraid for ourselves. We're so caught in our own thing. We're in our class divides, and we project ourselves onto everyone around us. We believe that everyone has the same opportunities as us. So again, if people are struggling or they're doing whatever they're doing, they must just not be trying hard enough. Because I did it, I could do it. Or we're so afraid for ourselves that we can't see others. And then she says, and we don't want the system to change because we want to get there too. And that's the other thing, right? We are then completely convinced that it's wealth and power that makes us happy. that if we can just be good enough, if we can fight for ourselves enough, if we can keep climbing the ladder enough, we're going to get to a place where all of our existential dread goes away. So here's, like, again, right, the deeper reason of why we hate ourselves. We are afraid of pain. We are afraid of suffering that we can't control. And unfortunately, the, like, human condition is that we are aware enough that we are going to die. We are aware enough that we can suffer and have no idea why that's happening. So we've made up a whole bunch of rules and a whole bunch of stories to try to protect ourselves from that existential dread. I'm a good person, and if I follow all the right rules, and whatever that is, right? Are you going to follow the Christian book? Are you going to follow the Buddhist book? Are you going to follow a cultural book? What book are you going to follow to be a good person? And that is supposed to protect us from bad things happening to us, from the pain of not having our needs met and not being able to express ourselves. Because that's where pain comes from. Can't express myself, don't get my needs met, being antagonized in some way. We're all convinced that something, some rule book, is going to save us from ourselves, make us good enough, so that we will have what we are unconscious that we even want, which is not possible on this planet. So to a degree, we need to be very, very clear about this. To a degree, money, access, and power 100% gives us safety. Gives us access to food, gives us access to water, gives us access to community, gives us access to resources. There is a degree to which not having enough does make you suffer all the time. No matter what spiritual practice you're doing, no matter what mindset you have, if you don't have enough food, you are going to be suffering. So that's the first thing. There is a level at which we can get our needs met and be pretty okay that does make you happier than when you don't have that stuff. Just naturally, you don't have to fight for it. It's just, you're gonna feel better. Okay? And then anything beyond that doesn't make us happier. Generally speaking, excess doesn't actually make us happier. But we are constantly told that it will. That if you're not happy where you are, if you're not happy with enough, because they never want you to be happy with enough. Because if you were happy with enough, you're not going to go for more. Which means you're not going to be part of the ever-expanding profit margins of those at the top. You're not going to keep sacrificing yourself for the system. And the system would crumble if that happened. So they keep convincing you that any little thing that's wrong, it's not society, right? It's not that fitting in hurts. It's not that what we have to do to be productive in our culture hurts. It's not that we're all disconnected from our bodies and disconnected from our empathy and disconnected from what would be like a natural cycle or working in a healthy way or any of that stuff. No, that's not why you're upset. That's not why you hurt. The reason you hurt is because you suck. You're not doing enough. You're not expanding enough. And you need more. So turn to the self-help industry. What about all those millionaires, self-made millionaires and billionaires that you can learn from? Just go to Tony Robbins and he'll shake your head until you're the most productive person ever. It's bullshit. It's everywhere. It's in spirituality just as much as it's in, secular life. That you are not enough and you are never enough, and more is always better. And so then again, we are constantly striving for more instead of finding our enough and realizing that redistribution so that more people can have a reasonable life is actually the answer. And then separating ourselves from the system and finding the things that actually have value. Being able to spend time outside. Or have an actual conversation with somebody. Or some of these experiences that aren't consumption and aren't production. Having an emotional experience with yourself. Having a spiritual connection. This is all robbed from us in culture and society, or it's monetized in some way and cheapened because we're not allowed to be human. So this is what I'm saying. We're told that this existential dread we have, that if we are ourselves, we will be rejected and then we will die. And the existential dread of realizing that we are going to die, we are going to suffer, and we are not in control of that, and we have no idea what's going to happen in the afterlife, cannot be bought or sold away. But we're convinced that it can. So then we keep climbing and climbing and climbing to get there, as she says, instead of realizing, no, we need to deal with our existential dread. The existential reality that some of our suffering is because of the system, and we can change and fix that. That some of our suffering is because of our actions and because of our choices. That there are laws to how real reality functions, right? Like, you can't just jump on the bed and eat Cocoa Puffs all night and not have a negative reaction because you have a physical body. So we need to learn what the rules are that actually do exist. Because there are real, actual rules that do decrease suffering and increase pleasure. And that's a part of what the self-love path and the mystery school is all about. Awakening to real reality and the real rules that aren't living up to human expectation, but it's what are the actual rules of reality? And how do we live within them so that we have maximum pleasure and minimum pain to what we can control? And then we start to break down the rules of society that have nothing to do with real reality. Nobody needs the next, latest, greatest bag. It's just, we don't need it. It does not improve the quality of your life, other than some people might look at you and think you're rich and that's good. But we need to reorganize society to be more equitable. And we need to keep talking about this stuff. And then below that, we need to realize that there's no escape from suffering. We are all going to have pain for the rest of our lives. And it's that doing the best we can with what we know, it's taking the control that we have, and then it's developing tools to work through the pain we can't control. Because we can't always make it better, and we can't always solve it. And sometimes that's an emotional journey we have to go on. And then even below that is the existential reality of being alive. We're going to die. We don't know how. We don't know where. We don't know when. And we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. That is reality. We can't buy or sell that away. We can't spiritualize that away. That thing that we all dread when we lay in bed at night is going to be there. So how do we start talking about it? How do we start having spiritual experiences that help us deal with it? How do we navigate that without it driving us into, okay, yeah, if I just binge less and make more money, I can get rid of this feeling. This feeling I'm not even really aware that it's there or what it is. We got to start to acknowledge what it is to be human. So our self-hate is how we're trying to protect ourselves from pain. That's why people think it's dangerous. Self-hate is a self-protective mechanism. That's why we're doing it. That's why people fear self-love. Because when we love ourselves, we are going to get connected to our pain. We are going to get connected to the fact that all the rule books, some of the rules are true, some of them are not, some of them are arbitrary, some of them are man-made to control people. There's a lot of shit in there. And reality is complex and gray and hard to navigate. And that's the reality. And then it protects us again from the idea that people are being exploited and abused and abandoned and they don't deserve it. But we just think it's happening to them for a reason because they're bad and wrong and I'm not. And then the shame and the blame and the guilt is how we keep ourselves in line. It's how we avoid doing things that are natural to us, that got us rejected, and how we force ourselves to do things that are very unnatural to us but got us accepted. That's what self-hate does. It keeps us in line for that survival instinct that tells us that fitting in is the way to get your needs met. So self-love is about unpacking all this. And it will make you dangerous to society. Just not in the way that people think. It's not going to make you a murderer. It's going to make you someone who then dismantles the system. So this is why we hate ourselves. This is why we fight the idea of self-love. And it feels dangerous. Because we really think if I am my real self, I'll get rejected and I'll die. We don't want to be connected to our pain. We don't want to be connected to why we're really doing the things that we're doing. We just want someone to tell us, yeah, you need to stop that. That's a bad part of you and you need to get rid of it. And if you do, you'll be protected from being punished like those bad people. It's simpler. Self-hate is the simple way. But it's not reality. All right? So those are just some of the reasons we cling to self-hate. And if we can start to understand that, we can start to move towards what we really want and what we really need, which is true self-love and compassion. Okay? Okay. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Just some stuff to consider. And I'll see you next week.